Hi, it's Paolo. Today I want to tell you about what is probably our most significant contribution so far to making available a type of tea that was not available before. So puerh UK was founded on the fact that young puerh, even if it's ancient tree, often it's just not very satisfying to drink. It can be a bit harsh on the stomach. It's just not as rich. It's not as thick. The cheese not as balanced, and this has always been true. However, in the last 10 years in particular, there is a quality of ancient tree puer that has never been made before. So we call this quality benchmark ancient tree. Benchmark because it's the best possible expression of a specific garden, but only a few gardens are allowed in this. And actually, there's quite a few things in the quality standard. I'll go into them in a moment. So the quality standard is, first thing, the area is a classic puer area. This means quite a lot of Yiwu, some of the 6 famous tea mountains, some more pockets isolated in the rest of Shinshabanna. For instance, Laobanjiang certainly counts, other small areas in Mengai can count as well. And then the farther away we go from Banna, the more isolated these pockets are. So for example, Shigui and Bingdao and Linchang will certainly count. Kunlusan also counts. Some areas of Laos bordering Yiwu also counts. But there's a lot of puer producing areas that really are not in the classic puer production areas, and because the quality is not as good. So that's the first part of the quality standard. Then the second part, very important, is the varietal is standard puer, not a wild one. If we're talking about old trees, of course, at one extreme, you can just go to a forest here in the West and you say, there's a very old tree and I just pick the leaf of it. Obviously, that's not puer. And then there is standard puer, so the kind of puer tea varietal that people have always been drinking. And then there's a lot of something in the middle. So there's a lot of what is called wild varietal or yeshang that just behaves quite differently from standard puer. The more different they behave, the less they can belong in this quality standard. The picking of the tea needs to be the first spring pick. Also, there needs to be no more than 2 or at most 3 picks per year. The environment needs to be clean. There's no pesticide, there's no fertilizer, there's no pollution, ideally no development around. And also, here we're always talking about a specific kind of ancient tree, not tea trees in general. So the trees have never been cut down before. Actually, a lot of ancient trees were cut down over the Cultural Revolution and before. And there's not that many areas that have trees that have never been cut down before. Again, there's a massive difference in quality. So minor variations are possible, but one minor variation, no more. For instance, we have one tea that is purple leaves varietal in Yula, but it's the best purple leaf varietal we've ever tried. We have something in Laos, again it's the best Laos tea we've ever tried, and the varietal is very much standard puer. In fact, it feels more Yiwu than a lot of Yiwus. Or we have a very old tea, very, very old tree that's in BangDong. BangDong in Linchang is out of the classic puer areas, however, only there you can find a tree as old and as big as this. And so that makes it worth slightly going out of the quality standard. But you should really keep this 6 things. So classic puer area, varietal, which peak, environment, and trees that have never been cut down. You should really keep these 5 things as close to the standard as possible to be able to be called benchmark. So benchmark means you can try this against another tea that claims to be ancient tree puer, and you will very, very clearly see the difference. Actually, when you have the same vessel, for example, the same gaiwan, the same size, and you make the same length of infusion, it's very, very obvious to tell what's really ancient tree puer and what's not. Now, how is it obvious? Overall, one of the things you will find with the most old tree, and again, the highest quality is that the tea is sweeter and there is very low astringency. Astringency particularly defined as drying astringency, so it doesn't leave your mouth feeling dry. This characteristic is almost universal in all old tree of very good quality. And the older the tree is, the smoother, the sweeter, and the less astringency. Now, obviously, some areas are more powerful than others, but even then, you will find that the oldest tree in a specific area are sweeter, less astringent, and generally smoother. Another thing you can really tell about extremely old trees and even just ancient trees is that the qi is really, really comfortable, not just on the mind, but also on the body. Even people that cannot feel qi in the mind so much, very often when they drink tea of this quality, they get used to body sensations that are really, really comfortable. You really do not find that with younger tree. You do not find that with a lot of Yeshang varietals, wild varietals that I was talking about before. To drink benchmark ancient tree puerh, it's best to use water with low minerals, low TDS, like really, really low, even below 50 would be ideal. This is because they're so powerful. Actually, I usually use 2 grams. This is my daily session. This stuff is so powerful that you don't really need that much more. Later I will drink some of this and you will see. And the final thing to say is that this kind of quality is really quite satisfying to be drunk even when it's young or even when it's aged only a few years. That's kind of the whole point of us looking for such high quality, that it doesn't need to be aged to be that satisfying. In fact, 2024 tea feels quite good and comfortable in the stomach, rich, satisfying. But then when it gets to even like 3-5 years of age, it already feels way better quality and more comfortable and more aged than a lot of the 2000s factory cakes, for example. It's really, really quite remarkable. The same effect that we have when we have the 01 and 02 Evo from Shanghai, which are pure ancient tree. Even though they're only 23, 22 years old, they feel so much more comfortable than 80s and 90s plantation tea cakes, which are all the tea cakes that were in the 80s and 90s. So far I talked to you about the quality of benchmark ancient tree puerh, and so this is how the cakes look like. So this is Lontanqing. This one is gray because it's a blend of various ancient tree teas, and this one is blue because it's a single tree. So this one is, as on the back, you will see stamped as one specific tree. So blue, single tree, gray, a few different ancient trees. Now, single tree is really, really exciting. If some benchmark teas are pure ancient trees, a lot of them tends to be single tree because it's a higher quality still. So drinking single tree, Danzhu, it's very, well, it's not very different, but it's quite different from drinking a blend of different teas. So the main differences are the tea will change quite significantly from the beginning to the end. So you really get to drink kind of the spirit, the soul of one tea. Like there is a journey that it really takes you on the journey, really being in the forest as close as you can. And by the way, when we say single tree, we don't mean we pick a random single tree. Like the single tree that we have is the best trees in the area, like the top 2-5% best trees. So these are the oldest, the tallest, the biggest. In areas like the Guyolin, the state protected forest in Yiwu, usually we get these extra tall Gaogan trees, while in other areas where there's no forest, sometimes we get trees that are much wider. So maybe the trunk starts to be really massive. And particularly, we have the idea of a king tree. So a king tree is one that produces, depends who you ask, like more than, say, 4 kilos, 5 kilos of maocha. But in general, all single tree that we have is not a random single tree. Like they're really the very best expression you can get. So it changes quite a lot over the session. And we do not really drink single tea for having a strong expression of each single attribute, but rather for the purity of it. So there is one single taste in a very good and satisfying way. Well, imagine you're steeping a single tree and a blend of other ancient tree teas of the same garden. The single tree will change a lot, and at some point, for example, it's possible that some point in the session it's possible the blend will be slightly sweeter or will be slightly thicker and richer. That is possible. However, you will quickly find when you drink some of it that the purity of single tree is really something that people treasure. And there is a reason that the very best trees are picked as single tree. This has been happening for the last 10 years. It happens more and more. And in general, anyway, the quality is higher because usually only the very best trees are chosen for to be a single tree. So I was saying before that one particular type of single tree is the king tree, or a tree that makes quite a lot of leaf. Usually the span can be massive, we're talking like 5-6 meters. Tea trees don't tend to get that tall, particularly if they don't have other trees around competing for space like they do in the forest. But a king tree really is quite magic. Here I really need to speak about the age of trees. So there's no scientific, precise way to tell the age of trees. Every time you see a single number, you should really, really doubt it. And this is what gives rise to so many, oh, this is ancient tree, this is 300 years, this is 500, this is 2000 years. These numbers are kind of meaningless, really. The only thing you can do is check this tea against other teas of the same area and against other teas of other areas that are meant to be really, really old. And eventually, with experience, you will find that they do share some characteristic. So certainly what I was talking about earlier about the strong sweetness with very low astringency, the purity of feeling of the qi, not just in the mind, but in the body as well. Those are the best way to tell. So in Malaysia, with Limping Siang, which is probably, well, certainly of the English speakers, is probably the most knowledgeable about tea in the world. There might be some more that speak Chinese, but I do not know them. But certainly about the people that speak English as well, he is probably the foremost alive authority on puerh and tea in general. So I drank a few, he has two in particular that I drank with him, of very old, meant to be more than 1,000-year-old tree. And yeah, they do have those qualities much better. Those qualities, particularly the sweetness, the low astringency, the comfortableness, and particularly they get into this taste that is like enhanced water. It's not attacking your mouth with a lot of strength and flavor and density, but when you check, it's definitely there, and it's completely, absolutely comfortable. Now, this may not make a lot of sense to beginners. It will make sense with time as you drink more and more of this tea. And I tried a lot of others that were meant to be king trees or very, very old trees, over 1,000 years old, with, mixed results. I don't think I found anything quite like what Limping Siang had until we sourced this specific tree. So this one is BangDong JiGuShu. JiGuShu means extremely old. It's 2022 and is a king tree. So I think there was about 6 kilos of leaf for this one. The span is massive. The height is not that massive. I think we're in the region of 6 to 10 meters for both. But the tea really has, like the most refined tea you can imagine. This is on par of the oldest trees I've ever drunk. And so people normally would just say, oh yeah, this is a 2,000-year-old tree, or 1,000, 1,500. Because it's really, really impossible to know. Everything I can say is this is probably the oldest tree you will ever drink in your life. Probably one of the most refined tea you will ever drink in your life. And in fact, if you do have the good luck of drinking something older and better than this, it means that, well, share some with me. I would really love to. And in general, it means you're very well connected to tea. Yeah, I struggle to say words to say much more about it, really. Like, it's really, really obvious when you drink it. So I'm gonna drink a couple cups right now and just tell you what I feel. It's got very strong floral smell, even through 2 layers. Let's open it up. This is how it looks like. Gosh, the smell is so strong. This is how it looks like. This is my cake. So previously I put 2 grams of tea in here. And yeah, I'm gonna try. So I'm just warming up some water. Obviously this tea doesn't need rinsing. It's as good as you can get. Because I'm using low TDS water, I'm gonna steep it for quite a bit longer than I normally would. So when there's no minerals, not so much minerals in the water, it doesn't extract as fast. Still gonna do the first one a little bit quick Oh, let me show you the color. This is like the color of pure, sweet water, really. You might take this word water as like, oh, what's it talking about? But really, the more you drink tea, the more you will see that this kind of subtlety is one of the qualities to most be prized. There is immediate sweetness everywhere in the mouth. Astringency is non-existent. But it still has quite a lot of backbone and thickness and richness as soul, in a way that a tea that doesn't have astringency because it's been overcooked will not have. So yeah, you can overcook puerh and remove a lot of astringency in that way, but then it doesn't have the same everywhere aftertaste, strong flavor density. It's hard to describe. It's like as if everything, all the good things about puerh are both really, really present and yet subtle, and there's no flaws whatsoever. Yeah, maybe that's a good description. This is still a relatively short steep. I'm gonna do a slightly longer one later. Compared to the Yivus, this one is really, really quite different. And in fact, if you're new to single tree and new to this kind of tea, I suggest you drink this one last, because yeah, it's really quite a bit more different. On the elegance to power scale, so this is a neutral scale. In terms of quality, you imagine the quality being at the top, but most teas are in the middle. Tianmensan is certainly full on the power end of the scale, and this is much more on the elegant or refined side of the scale. So even in one cup, I can feel the qi quite strong, not in the body yet, but certainly in the mind, like it feels like, oh, it's different. And yeah, it's just so drinkable. If you imagine like the most pleasurable food that you just kind of want to drink and drink, this is that kind of liquid. Okay, so just to conclude, I've made one quite a bit longer steep than I usually would, just to see what happens. With this kind of tea, it's really, really hard to overbrew. You're still not going to get astringency. Again, that's one sign of very, very high quality, very, very old tree. By the way, in terms of tree, the older the tree is, it's very good. Often, the older the tree is, the bigger it is, but also the healthiest. So the ones that make the more leaves are generally the healthiest. Hence why king tree definition is also based on how much leaves they make. Wow. Yeah, this is like fuller and richer, and yet the astringency is still, I think, none. I wanted to say very low, there is a bit, but I think none. Yeah, thoroughly satisfying. I really wish you can try a tea like this in your life.